So I really think making connections and getting to know your students on a personal level. How could I play into the fact that the student is doodling? How could I use that in a positive way? How could I use this very chatty student in a positive way? And it's like, oh, a small group discussion or a poster.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Intuit for Education's Teaching Finance series. Today, we're going to dive deep into the topic of differentiation and personalization to meet students' needs. Now, when I was still teaching, I actually found this in particular to be incredibly hard to do. In my classes, my students had such a huge range of what they needed from me to help them be successful. And sometimes the more I tried to be intentional and flexible with my lessons, the harder it was for me to manage my classroom behaviors. Intuit for Education's professional development page actually has a great on-demand module for educators that breaks down how to best meet your students' needs by various methods like product or process differentiation. Anyway, I'm super pumped today to learn more on the subject from our special guest. She's a high school math teacher, by the way, and so was I, so I have an extra soft spot for her. Sierra Bohamra, or as the kids call her, Mrs. Bo, is a math teacher turned social media influencer from Boise, Idaho. She has been an educator for 7 years and now teaches high school. She has a bachelor's in elementary education and a master's in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in math. Math is so cool. What's cool about Sierra is that she enjoys making math fun and trendy, and it really shows on her social media platform. So you guys all gotta take a look. And you know what? When I met Sierra for the first time to chat about doing this podcast, her students actually surprised her with Chipotle. It really just shows how beloved she is at her school. Anyway, Sierra, I'll let you introduce yourself some more.
Well, thank you, May. That was a great introduction, and you covered a lot of good things. So, yeah, it was great. So going along with that, like May said, I'm a high school educator. I teach math. Funny though, when I started, like you said, I got my bachelor's in elementary ed. So my dream was to be a third grade teacher.
Why third grade, by the way?
Math. I just thought they were really cute at that age. They love you and they think you're like the coolest thing ever. And, I liked that. I've always liked young kids, but going through school, I got an endorsement. My endorsement area was in math. So I had to student teach not only in a elementary classroom, but I ended my student teaching in a junior high classroom, in a math classroom, which I was really nervous about, but I totally fell in love with it. I fell in love with math. I fell in love with the older students. And now I can't see myself doing anything else. I just love secondary math.
Wow. So wait, when you first graduated or started teaching, you never went into elementary education then?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, wow. Just been in the secondary world.
Wow, amazing. And then I remember you were telling me you taught junior high too and high school, or both, or just one?
Yeah, I've taught both. I started in, was kind of funny. I student taught in this 8th grade math classroom, and my mentor teacher was leaving, so I ended up taking her job. So it worked out really well. So I taught 8th grade math for 2 years, pre-algebra. Then I moved to high school, which is where I've been for this is my 5th year in high school. And I've taught pretty much everything. I've taught Algebra 1, geometry, and now I'm in Algebra 2.
Oh, awesome. I wanted to hear more generally too, before we dive into like financial literacy stuff. How did you get into the influencer social media world? That seems really daunting. How did it blow up? Just curious. Like, how did that happen? It was just from a video that people loved and then it spread?
Yeah, I think it was like my first viral video. I was lip syncing something from Legally Blonde. And
I love that movie.
Yeah, same. It was like, you go here. And I was mimicking being like the new teacher at the school. Thinking it was teachers thinking I was too young, like thinking I was a student in the
Right.
copy room. So that's like what it was.
Oh,
It was like funny
yeah.
and it blew up. It got like a million views or whatever. So it
That's
was
so cool.
crazy. Yeah.
I think, financial literacy in particular, I think relates a lot to different math standards and subjects that you may be teaching as well. Can you share a little bit just in general about what your thoughts are on financial literacy, just that space, and then in relation to your students? Because I know your students are in high school now.
I feel like financial literacy sometimes is like assumed that we just know how to do things with
Hmm.
money, like, because it's not always explicitly taught. But then when my students or myself gets into the real world, I'm like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, how do I do my taxes? Like, no one taught me how to do this. And so I think it's
Totally.
super important in school because they need those skills. Education's all about preparing students for the real world, I think it is, to be good
Hmm.
citizens. And part of that is being able to manage their finances. That's such a big part of adulthood. Everything revolves around finances. So any opportunity I
Yeah.
get, I want to throw a little financial literacy in there so my students feel better prepared for the real world.
I love that. And now that you talked about that, I wonder if you can share some examples of things that maybe you've done to sprinkle that into your lessons with your students. Like, how do you incorporate certain skills like budgeting or savings or spending or something in your math lessons?
I'm thinking of like particular unit that we do in algebra,
Hmm.
and that's exponential equations, exponential functions. Exponential functions relates really nicely to buying a car. So I like to do a project on buying a car in my class. One, because my students are like 16, so they're getting their licenses, cars
Mm.
are fresh on the mind. And two, it's like applicable skills to have later because eventually they probably will buy a car.
Hmm.
So we incorporate like compound interest, exponential functions with getting a loan to buy their dream car. And then
Hmm.
we also talk about like exponential decay, the value of the car. And maybe it's
Right.
better to buy a used car than a new car because the
Right.
value depreciates so quickly in the beginning. So I just try and
Mm.
sprinkle it in, especially to that exponential functions unit, and the kids
Yeah.
totally love it. Their buy-in is
Do
like
they?
huge. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna ask, like, how do you engage? How do you make sure it's engaging for them? Like, is it that you're doing something really applicable for them in their life at that time, or like, how do you make that lesson engaging? Because I feel like when I was teaching math, honestly, a lot of times my students were like, "Ugh, I have to learn, sine, cosine. Like, what is that gonna use?" And
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to like get that engagement going.
Totally. And I get that too from my students, but definitely
Hmm.
not in this unit. I try to
Mm.
make it personal or like kind of differentiate it for each student in the way of letting them pick their own car because all of them have
Oh,
like a dream
cool.
car,
Yeah.
and also getting to pick like their loan, like which loan do they think if they work this
Oh.
job, like can they afford this monthly payment? Like what's a better loan? And I've had kids pick like the most expensive cars, but
Yeah.
I've also had kids pick like used cars, like I don't want to say junker, but kind of like I've
I
had some kids, like one kid wanted a Crown Vic for some reason. They
don't
really
even know what
wanted
that is.
one.
Okay.
Like the old police cars, Crown
Okay,
Victoria, like,
okay.
yeah, they just really wanted one. And so those were like more affordable. So her monthly payments were cheaper versus like the
Mm,
BMW that was way expensive.
yeah,
So I think that helped, one, it being realistic and cars are on their mind, but two, letting them pick their own car, pick their own
yeah,
loan. They were super engaged. We were all engaging in the same type of math, but they were
right.
able to engage kind of in their own personal way since they got to pick
Yeah.
their own
Oh,
car.
that's so cool. What does differentiating and personalizing for your students mean to you? And even in the math space or financial literacy space or just in general?
Well, for me, it means making the content accessible to everyone and also making it personal so that students have a better buy-in.
Yeah.
Specifically with Intuit, I've noticed that they have a ton of options for differentiating and making
Mm.
the content personal to the students. One way that Intuit does that is they have different options for how a student can express their learning, their math
Hmm.
understanding through a product. So I really liked that they offered different routes rather than the traditional test. So of course the students
Hmm.
can take a test, but there's also they offered like small group discussion, making a
Hmm.
video, or even having like a one-on-one conference with a teacher, which is
Yeah,
something I never even thought of doing. So I like that
right.
they have a ton of resources that as a teacher I can just pull ideas from.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that the curriculum is usable in a way to differentiate for students. When I try to do more differentiating for my students, it was hard for me to kind of manage a classroom, and because they were doing different things and different processes and people were curious what others were doing, or like why didn't they have to take the test this way but could do this.
Mhm.
What tips, if any, I don't know if you struggle with that or now you're more veteran as a teacher, what tips could you give someone who is also like me struggling or was struggling with that?
I think being okay with a little bit of chaos. Like sometimes my
Mhm.
room is like they're totally doing different things. I think one, being okay that a bunch of students are doing different things, and
Yeah.
two, like normalizing it a little bit because we'll do small groups. Like I might pull a group, or my co-teacher might pull a group, and then other kids are doing something else. And I think
Right.
just making that a part of the norm can help the students kind of not push back against it, I guess. But I also think like students recognize that they learn different ways, and if I when I've had a student like, why did they get something different than me? And it's like, well, we all learn differently, and that's okay. We can all like do different things, and it's cool. Something that I really like about Intuit is there's all these video modules that they can watch
Hmm.
to kind
I
of
love
give them
those
an
too.
idea.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so you can kind of, if you do like a individualized activity in your classroom, you can assign certain videos depending
Yeah.
on if a student has like zero financial literacy knowledge or
Yeah.
students that know a little bit, and they can start
Yeah.
at different levels, and then eventually they'll probably all rise to the same level. But I like that you can
Hmm.
kind of start students in different places depending,
Hmm.
or you can pull a small group of the kids that like never don't know anything about
Hmm.
financial literacy, and then
Yeah.
have the other students work independently with a
Yeah.
little bit of financial literacy knowledge.
I know you said a lot already about, how to best meet your students' needs. So like really get to know them, play to their interest. Is there anything else you want to share with other educators who are listening right now about how any teacher in any type of classroom, whether math or not, can differentiate and think about that concept if they're kind of nervous to start?
Totally. I just feel like making connections with my students is the biggest thing. That way I can get to know
Hmm.
them on a personal level and figure out where their interests are. Like for example, noticing the student that's doodling,
Yeah.
noticing the student like playing as maybe their what you might see as like a behavior thing as
Yeah.
more of like a benefit. Like, how could I play into the fact that the student is doodling? How could I use that in a positive way?
Mm,
How could I use this very chatty student in a positive
right.
way? And it's like, oh, a small group discussion or a poster,
Yeah.
something like
So
that. So I
true.
really think making connections and getting to know your students on a personal level so you
Yeah.
can play to their
Yeah.
strengths.
I love that. And you saying that just reminded me. I think you're such an awesome teacher, by the way. This is like the type of teacher that like I would, model after. I know a big part when I was teaching, and I'm sure other listeners here are feeling as well, is when you're planning these kind of tougher lessons to try to differentiate for certain people. How do you do that with all the things that you have going on with school, with meetings, with grading? If you can walk us through your plan, your day to day of how you plan for your lessons, I think that will help listeners a lot as well.
I'm a little fortunate because I have taught this content before,
Yeah.
so I have old material. But I even think
Mhm.
if, like, for example, if you're teaching a financial literacy lesson, like start with the
Mhm.
Intuit content and go from there instead of starting from scratch. But I
Mm,
take like an old lesson and then for like the general population. And then I
yeah.
look at it and I try to look through a lens of like, for example, like a non-native English speaker. And I try
Right.
to like think, and this is where my multilingual teacher really comes in, but
Yeah.
she will help me of like, okay, let's take the main thing and then let's like get rid of like the fluff so that we can really
Yeah.
focus in on the language specifically in that case? Or how can we make this a little more visual? Could we add a picture or something? The nice
Yeah.
thing about that is it not only benefits though that population of students, but it can benefit like multiple other students as well.
Yeah. I love that.
Um, Sometimes myself working through the math, I can be like,
Hmm.
oh, like as a math teacher,
Hmm.
these things come quickly and easily to
Hmm.
me.
Right.
But
Right.
then I'm like, ooh, like maybe that, like as I was working out the math, like that might
Hmm.
be helpful if I write a little hint there.
Yeah.
Or maybe I should like put a blank there, like a y
Right.
equals blank, so they can kind of they know where to go. So I think it
Right.
honestly it comes with time and learning the concepts, but I
Yeah.
like having someone to bounce my ideas off of, or honestly
Hmm.
finding a curriculum that I can take something
Start with.
from,
Yeah.
start with, and then tweak. Or again, Intuit has all of these awesome differentiation options that,
Hmm.
especially as a first year teacher, I would have loved, because they say things
Yeah.
like, oh, for the process, for example, like, oh,
Mm.
you can omit this, like you can omit
Yeah.
this, or you can do this instead. And that makes it
Right.
really nice if you have like not really a strong idea for where to start.
Yeah, right. I think what you touch upon in terms of like getting the general curriculum and then scaffolding it in different ways for different audiences is so true. And yeah, I feel like your students are so lucky to have you because and your teacher too, your co-teacher, because I feel like that really helps hone in, the curriculum that you guys are learning. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Why do you think it's so important for your students at this age to learn some of the basic financial literacy concepts now before they go to whatever they do after high school? Like, why is it important now versus when you're 21 and then you're doing your taxes after getting your first job? So why is it important in the K-12 world right now?
I think right now they have like the access to teachers. They have to
Mm-hmm.
be in school. So like now's the time to like teach them those things. And also some of my students like have jobs now. And so they're like starting to get into the workforce. They're starting to do those
Mm-hmm.
things. Adult life is already, there's so many things that come with being an adult, like learning how to cook, like learn like time management, like there's so many other things that they have to do. And so I think
Yeah.
not having the stress of having to learn how to balance your budget, how to
Right.
do your taxes, like if they already
Yeah.
know how to do that, they're prepared, and it's not something extra to the things that they already have to face in adulthood. They can feel a little more
Yeah.
prepared. They can have those skills.
Yeah.
And I think teenagers are like, they're so interested in real life things that will
Mm-hmm.
apply to them after school. So I think they're
Mm-hmm.
already, the engagement is there. So now's the
Yeah.
time. And it's so
Yeah.
close. Like they're like 3 years from adulthood or
Right.
2 years from adulthood. So it gets
Right.
them excited, kind of like, oh, I'm going to
Yeah.
have money to do things with. And let's teach you how to do
Yeah.
positive things with that
Let's
money.
prepare you. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last question for you is just in general, it doesn't have to be related to math or financial literacy or anything. Any advice that you would give to a new educator or a veteran educator, just from your experiences, what you've learned?
Honestly, relationships are so important. And I know that's said a lot, but
Mhm.
it's really true. Like, it makes me want to go to work in the morning if I have good
Aw.
relationships with my students. Like, it just,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, obviously, math is important, school is important, but
Hmm.
being happy, positive, adult in a teenager's life, I think is the most important. So
Yeah, I
I
love
want to
that.
be that like happy, positive person, even if I'm not feeling that personally inside. Like, I want to be a little like ray of sunshine in their really long, busy day. Because I remember being a teenager and it being
Yeah.
hard, and life is hard. And so I think taking the time out of my day to notice if a kid got a haircut, if they drew
Aw.
like a little like anime drawing on their notebook, like making those connections and being genuine, I think
Right.
makes such a big difference. And I feel like I've formed tight bonds with my students through doing that, because I
Yeah.
genuinely care about them, and I think that they know that as well.
Oh, I love that. That resonates with me so much, and I love that. Thank you so much, Sierra. This is so awesome talking to you. Where can people find you? Because I know, you have the trendy teacher. Just share all your socials with everyone. I would love people to see your stuff.
Yeah. So TikTok is my big thing. I'm That Trendy Teacher on TikTok, and I'm That Trendy Teacher _ on Instagram. So
why an underscore?
Because That Trendy Teacher was already taken, so I had to throw a little underscore in there. But yeah, that's where you can find me. I post all the time. So yeah, I'm like always up to date with stuff. And if you want to do a little math, I throw a little dancing and math in there too.
Love it. I've done it. Some of the math is not easy, so everyone should go try it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sierra. We're so happy to have talked with you today. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Wow. We really are so lucky to get Sierra on as a guest with us today. That was really inspiring to hear, and really, she sounds like such a wonderful teacher. Now, if this is your first time tuning in, go check out our first 2 episodes. They're so good as well. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on new episodes. And of course, check out Into It for Education and join me in the educator community. Bye.